I spent my entire life making sacrifices so my daughter could have everything. She grew up surrounded by luxury and privilege, but now that I'm old and vulnerable, she's abandoned me in a nursing home like I'm a burden she can't be bothered with. I am a 40-year-old single parent, and I wanted to recount the journey that brought me to this point with my daughter, Aisha, who is now 18. When Aisha was 5, her mother decided our existence no longer sufficed for her. One morning, she packed her belongings and departed, leaving a brief note explaining her intention to move overseas and marry a businessman who could provide the life she had always desired. I still recall Aisha clinging to my leg, inquiring about her mother's whereabouts. I fabricated a story, telling her she had embarked on a lengthy journey and would soon correspond, but that correspondence never materialized. Our modest community was not forgiving towards a man whose spouse had abandoned him. Whispers trailed me everywhere, from the local marketplaces to the courtyard adjacent to the mosque. In our traditional society, a wife deserting her husband was considered a profound dishonor, and individuals regarded me with a blend of sympathy and condemnation. Determined to prevent Aisha from feeling as though she had lost everything, I vowed she would never be deprived. I began working extended hours, dedicating mornings and afternoons to the textile factory and evenings to guarding a commercial complex as a security watchman. Those protracted nights often merged into one. I would struggle against slumber, standing by the plaza's main entrance, contemplating the tasks awaiting me the following day. When my shift concluded, I would rush home just in time to prepare Aisha's breakfast and accompany her to school. Her eyes would gleam whenever I surprised her with something special, like the fashionable footwear all her classmates wore or a vibrant lunchbox adorned with animated figures. I knew I was overspending, but each smile made the financial burden seem worthwhile. I liquidated my mother's gold bracelets, cherished items she had preserved for my future, and utilized the proceeds to cover the enrollment fees for one of the city's premier private educational institutions. I pawned my father's antique timepiece, the last memento I possessed of him, to acquire Aisha the latest mobile phone she persistently requested after her friends showcased theirs. At school functions, I observed parents in impeccably tailored suits and gleaming automobiles. I would then park my aged, dilapidated hatchback several blocks away to ensure Aisha's peers would not see me. I would position myself at the rear of the auditorium, attempting to fade into the background, hoping she felt she belonged among the offspring of affluent entrepreneurs and government officials. My elder brother and his spouse frequently took me aside. They cautioned me that I was overdoing it, that Aisha would grow up entitled and unappreciative if she never experienced life's difficulties. I refused to heed their advice. I could not tolerate the notion of people gossiping that my daughter appeared impoverished, that she was the product of a fractured household. I believed that if I provided her with everything, she would never perceive the void her mother had created. Each month, the invoices accumulated. I would forego meals to stretch our funds, investing every available rupee into Aisha's school excursions, new apparel, and endless charges. By the time she reached 10, she began to anticipate these provisions, never questioning their feasibility. I vividly recall the evening I had to part with our family's sole remaining heirloom, an elaborate silver necklace my grandmother had brought from her village decades prior. The pawnbroker offered me just enough to finance Aisha's piano lessons, which she claimed were crucial for her to integrate with her companions. On nights when my shift concluded late and I had missed dinner entirely, I would lie awake on my thin mattress, gazing at the ceiling. My bones ached, but I drew strength from envisioning Aisha entering school adorned in the same designer labels as the wealthiest children in town. In the mornings, when she offered me a smile before departing, it felt as though my sacrifices justified every sleepless night and every hungry day. Her teachers at school would occasionally speak with me during parent-teacher meetings, remarking on Aisha's politeness and intelligence. Neighbors commended my solo parenting, calling me a paragon for supporting my daughter after her mother had abandoned us both. Yet, they also inquired about Aisha's mother. I learned to evade the question with vague responses about her being occupied overseas and swiftly redirected the conversation. The truth felt too burdensome to disclose. As the years progressed, the emotional distance between Aisha and me began to widen. Upon reaching her teenage years, she ceased walking to school with me. I would offer, but she would state her friends were picking her up, then wait until I had left before joining them. Initially, I convinced myself it was merely adolescent behavior, a transient phase everyone experiences. However, soon, I started encountering anecdotes. A parent from school mentioned Aisha had informed classmates I was a prosperous businessman who frequently traveled. One afternoon, while delivering a forgotten assignment to her school, I overheard her laughing with her friends, jesting that I was merely an elderly chauffeur who barely spoke English. I remember standing motionless in the hallway as those words permeated my consciousness. I wished to believe she would outgrow this embarrassment. I thought if I simply toiled harder, provided more, acquired the next item she desired, she would recall my significance to her. But with each fresh request, each new demand, it became increasingly apparent that the daughter I had raised to never feel impoverished had grown accustomed to believing she deserved more than I could ever provide. And instead of appreciation, I sensed her drifting further away, avoiding me at every turn, as if my affection and dedication were something to conceal from the world. The first instance she overtly disregarded me was at a school event when she declined to pose for a photograph with me. I stood alone at the edge of the sports field while she posed with her friends and their fathers in pristine suits. I attempted to catch her gaze, but she looked through me as if I were non-existent. That was the moment I comprehended the consequences of all those years pushing myself to the brink. Not just to my health and financial state, but to the connection between myself and the sole individual I had strived to safeguard all along. It was during these instances that the origins of the painful division between us were established, and the subsequent narrative began to unfold. I commenced planning Aisha's 18th birthday several months in advance. She desired a celebration that would evoke envy among her classmates, something sufficiently lavish to demonstrate her belonging among the city's wealthiest families. I reserved an opulent banquet hall downtown and commissioned decorations that resembled those of a royal nuptial. The catering menu featured dishes I could not even pronounce, but Aisha insisted that was customary at everyone else's gatherings. I affixed my signature to documents for a bank loan that would require years to settle, hoping she would finally perceive me as the father capable of providing her with everything. On the night of the party, the hall gleamed with illumination and luxurious vehicles lined the thoroughfare outside. Guests arrived in designer attire, exchanging boisterous greetings as music resonated. Aisha stood at the entrance in a shimmering gown, smiling radiantly for photographs. Whenever parents approached, she introduced them to her friends, but never to me. I remained near the serving table, replenishing platters as they emptied to avoid additional charges for late-night staff. I attempted to catch Aisha's eye, but she navigated the throng as if I did not exist. Later in the evening, I positioned myself close enough to overhear Aisha laughing with a group of schoolmates. One of them inquired about her father. Without hesitation, she informed them I was merely an elderly chauffeur who assisted with errands and transported her to events. The words stung, but I continued clearing plates and glasses, ensuring the hall remained pristine until the final guest departed around midnight. Once everyone had left, I stayed behind, gathering discarded cups, sweeping confetti, and scrubbing spilt beverages from the flooring. The catering company offered cleanup services for a substantial fee, but I could not afford it. By the time I concluded in the early morning, prayers were commencing, and my legs trembled from exhaustion. I staggered home to change attire before proceeding directly to my shift at the factory. In the subsequent weeks, I struggled to maintain my work schedule. My physique felt heavier each morning, and I began arriving late to the factory. My supervisor cautioned me that another error would result in job loss. I could not disclose that I was barely sleeping, attempting to undertake every available extra shift. When the automobile malfunctioned, I knew I could not afford repairs. I sold it discreetly, using the funds to settle a portion of the party expenditures, and commenced commuting by crowded buses. Aisha remained oblivious. She assumed I still drove, as I departed the residence before she awoke and returned after she had fallen asleep. One evening, Aisha presented me with a brochure for an international summer program in Europe, stating all her friends were attending. The tuition and travel expenses exceeded my annual income. I attempted to explain its impossibility, but she looked me directly in the eye and declared that if I did not make it happen, I would never hear from her again. In a state of panic, I approached a local moneylender known for charging exorbitant interest, but who did not demand proof of income. I signed documents that sickened me to read, walking home with the realization that the debt would engulf me. Aisha departed for Europe a week later. She occasionally sent photographs of castles and shopping districts brimming with luxury brands, posing in new attire I had never seen before. Upon her return after 2 months, she entered the apartment carrying expensive handbags and wearing garments worth more than my earnings over 6 months. She surveyed our modest dwelling with disdain, remarking on its cramped and outdated feel. She criticized the furnishings as old and the neighborhood as embarrassing, questioning why we had not relocated to a superior area. One afternoon, Aisha's former school principal telephoned, stating her mother had attempted to contact the school, inquiring about Aisha. The principal offered to convey a message, but Aisha informed him she never wished to hear from her mother again. She told the school that I was the only parent she acknowledged. When I heard this, a faint glimmer of hope ignited within me, suggesting she might still perceive me as the father who had consistently been present. That hope was fleeting. I began experiencing acute chest pains that would compel me to halt mid-stride and lean against walls until they subsided. I knew I should consult a physician, but I could not risk losing work hours or incurring a hospital bill I could not afford. I continued to push myself to complete double shifts, clinging to the conviction that I could sustain everything if I simply exerted a little more effort. Then Aisha started hinting about her friends receiving new automobiles as graduation presents. She left brochures for luxury vehicles on the kitchen table and messaged me links to dealership websites. When I informed her we could not afford a car, she did not argue. She simply ceased communicating with me for days, slamming her bedroom door and ignoring my knocks. She walked past me in the mornings as if I were invisible. My elder brother visited one evening after my work. He seated me and explained that the debt had become unmanageable. He stated I was ensnared in a perilous cycle, jeopardizing everything for a child who no longer held me in esteem. He offered to assist me in devising a strategy to settle my obligations and gradually rebuild. However, before we could conclude our discussion, Aisha arrived home. She regarded my brother with unadulterated fury, asserting he had no right to interfere in our lives. She demanded his immediate departure. When he hesitated, she threatened to sever all contact with me if I did not compel him to leave. I escorted my brother to the door, apologizing profusely, and watched him depart, shaking his head. I returned inside, where Aisha was already in her room, music playing loudly enough that I knew any conversation that night would be impossible. I sat on the sofa in the dark, attempting to discern how to uphold my commitments to her when both my physical well-being and financial resources were nearly depleted. The weeks following the birthday celebration blurred into a routine of work, missed meals, and incessant calls from loan collectors. I repeatedly assured myself I merely required a little more time to repay everyone, but the debts were more substantial than I had realized. The local moneylender began dispatching individuals to my workplace to remind me of payments. They would stand near the factory gates, observing me as I clocked in, acknowledging me with chilling smiles. At night, they visited the apartment building, inquiring about my whereabouts from neighbors. The neighbors began to avoid me, fearing impending trouble. Aisha's university tuition statements arrived shortly thereafter. I had been endeavoring to save small amounts intermittently, but it was nowhere near sufficient. One evening, Aisha burst into the apartment, holding a notice from the university indicating overdue payment. She flung the document onto the table, demanding to know my plan for keeping her enrolled. Before I could respond, she declared that if I could not procure the funds, she would leave and never return. I began skipping lunch daily, utilizing the meager savings to pay portions of the fees. My weight diminished so rapidly that coworkers inquired if I was ill. I informed them I was merely fatigued. Aisha started inviting friends over more frequently. They filled the apartment with boisterous discussions about international excursions, expensive gadgets, and future aspirations. When someone inquired about my presence, Aisha responded that I owned several factories and was rarely home due to business travel. I overheard her uttering these statements while I sat quietly in the kitchen, concealed from view, completing chores to ensure the living room appeared immaculate upon their arrival. I attempted to remain awake during my night shifts at the security position, but one night, I dozed off for a few minutes. A supervisor discovered me slumped and instructed me not to return. Losing the second job felt like a blow to the chest. I did not know how I would cover rent and loans with only my factory income. In a desperate measure, I sold my wedding ring, an item I had retained even after my wife's departure. I also sold the last of my mother's jewelry, receiving only a fraction of their value, but enough to settle a portion of the most aggressive creditors. I concealed the missing items by reorganizing old boxes so Aisha would not notice. Aisha invited me to an awards ceremony at her university one evening. She instructed me to dress formally, but to avoid conversing with anyone. Upon our arrival, she walked ahead of me, greeting friends and professors without once glancing back. I attempted to remain near the entrances, but I observed her standing on stage introducing another student's father as her own. He wore a suit and possessed a refined demeanor I could never emulate. She smiled at him before everyone, holding his arm as photographers captured images. I stood in the shadows, my hands clenched to prevent them from trembling. After the ceremony concluded, I followed her outside. She turned and accused me of causing her embarrassment by appearing. Her voice was low, but sharp enough to wound. She informed me everyone believed the man she introduced was her father, and now they would begin asking questions. She demanded I transfer ownership of the apartment so she could secure a business loan, insisting she required it to safeguard her future. I hesitated, but she told me if I genuinely cared, I would grant her this opportunity. I signed the documents later that night, seated at the kitchen table while she observed. She departed immediately thereafter with the papers in her bag. I began experiencing lightheadedness during work. My chest pains intensified, radiating into my arm. One afternoon, as I was carrying a heavy carton, the world spun, and I collapsed to the ground. Coworkers gathered, summoning an ambulance. I awoke in a hospital bed, tubes in my arm, nurses adjusting monitors. They informed me I had fainted from a combination of exhaustion and untreated cardiac issues. I wished to depart as soon as possible, as every hour in the hospital meant I was not earning income. A few days later, as I drifted in and out of slumber, I noticed a woman at the foot of my bed. She wore an unfamiliar uniform and was conversing with the hospital staff. Papers were being signed, but I could not comprehend their discussion. I overheard something about a long-term care arrangement. The following morning, an ambulance arrived to transport me. I presumed they were taking me home, but the vehicle drove past our neighborhood, heading away from the city center. When it halted, they wheeled me into a building with a sign reading Golden Horizon Elder Residence. Inside, a nurse assisted me to a small room with a single cot and a metal cabinet. My bag containing a few garments and toiletries rested on the floor. The nurse explained Aisha had arranged for my stay there. I attempted to contact her using the hospital phone, but every attempt resulted in a message stating the number was blocked. I realized I could no longer reach her at all. Over the next few days, I requested staff assistance in sending letters through her university, but they were returned unopened with "Return to Sender" stamped across the envelopes. My elder brother discovered my location and came to visit. He stood at the foot of my bed, shaking his head. He informed me Aisha was already meeting with real estate agents, attempting to sell the apartment I had transferred. He stated he would help me contest it, but we needed to act swiftly. I listened as he spoke of engaging legal counsel and collecting evidence. Before he left, he promised he would not permit Aisha to seize everything I had left. As he departed, I surveyed the stark room, comprehending for the first time the extent of our decline, and recognizing I had no alternative but to commence fighting for the little that remained. The first morning, I awoke at the elder residence. I reached for my phone to check for messages, but it was absent. My suitcase containing clothing lay open beside the bed, the only item that had made it from the hospital. I attempted to stand, but dizziness compelled me back onto the mattress. When I pressed the call button for assistance, a caretaker arrived and clarified that Aisha had signed documents declaring me unfit to reside independently, thereby placing me there permanently. She presented me with a folder containing papers I did not understand, bearing official-looking seals and endorsements. I requested a telephone to call Aisha. Every effort concluded identically. A recorded message stated the number was no longer available. I sought help in dispatching a letter through her university's administrative office. Days later, the letter was returned unopened. I tried again with a fresh envelope, indicating a different return address, but it came back marked undeliverable. Each returned letter felt heavier than the last. My elder brother visited a few days after my arrival. He stood beside my bed, appearing more weary than I had ever witnessed him. He questioned how I could have transferred the apartment, reminding me I possessed no other property or savings. He informed me she had already contacted real estate agents, displaying photographs of the apartment. She was listing it online at a price that clearly indicated her intention to liquidate it as rapidly as possible. He cautioned me that time was limited. My chest pains intensified each night. The staff provided me with basic pain relievers, but nothing more. When I requested to see a doctor, they stated a visit would necessitate additional payment I did not possess. A nurse who occasionally checked on me offered her assistance. She utilized the staff computer to access my bank account, and I observed the balance flashing on the screen, depleted to a mere few hundred rupees. The last transaction indicated substantial transfers to Aisha's account in the days preceding my collapse. My elder brother returned this time accompanied by a lawyer. They sat with me in the small common area, documenting everything I recalled about the night I signed the apartment papers. I recounted how Aisha had threatened to disown me if I refused, how she stood over me as I inscribed my name on the forms. The lawyer informed me they would use my statement to demonstrate coercion, but cautioned me that more evidence was required to prevent the apartment sale in court. The lawyer checked property listings online, discovering my apartment already advertised for sale on several websites. Photographs of my living room, kitchen, and bedroom were publicly accessible, with captions touting perfect investment opportunities and a prime location. Viewing the images felt like observing strangers sifting through my life. Each image served as a reminder of how swiftly everything had slipped away. A week later, Aisha appeared at the elder residence. She was not alone. 3 of her acquaintances entered behind her, all dressed in expensive attire and carrying shopping bags. They stood at the foot of my bed, smirking awkwardly before quickly departing, displaying discomfort rather than outright amusement. Aisha gestured towards the room, informing them this was my rightful place now, explaining how she had finally liberated herself from the burden of caring for a worthless father. One of them captured a photograph of me seated there, transmitting it to someone on their mobile device. Another surveyed the room, commenting on the odor and the antiquated furnishings. Before her departure, Aisha approached closer and instructed me not to attempt contacting her again. Her gaze was frigid. I extended a hand, but she turned away, her friends laughing as they followed her out. The caretaker entered afterward, assisting me in wiping tears from my face without uttering a word. The following morning, my elder brother returned with news that offered a small ray of hope. The attorney had submitted emergency documentation to the court, initiating the procedure to halt the apartment sale. If the judge concurred, the listing would be suspended until the legal issues were resolved. We would require testimonies from neighbors, teachers, anyone who could corroborate the years I dedicated to Aisha and her subsequent treatment of me. During lunch in the communal dining area, I overheard 2 staff members conversing near the doorway. One remarked that Aisha had been telling her university friends how effortless it was to abandon me. She boasted about seizing everything I possessed and moving on without a second thought. She portrayed herself as more astute than everyone else, proud of how she had left me with nothing. Hearing those words substantiated what my elder brother and the lawyer were attempting to establish in court. She displayed no remorse. That evening, the lawyer visited again to update me on the paperwork. He stated the judge had agreed to consider an injunction, but we needed more evidence and declarations promptly. My elder brother affirmed he would begin gathering statements from neighbors who witnessed me working late nights, teachers who knew I attended every school event, and anyone else who could demonstrate the truth of my devotion to Aisha. The lawyer elaborated that if the injunction was granted, the apartment sale would be immediately halted, affording us time to prepare a case proving I was compelled into signing the transfer. Without it, the apartment could be sold at any moment, and the funds would vanish with Aisha. He indicated that the next 2 weeks would be crucial, with hearings likely to commence soon. As he departed, he placed his hand on my shoulder, pledging his unwavering commitment to the fight. I surveyed the dimly lit room, the flaking paint on the walls, the small window offering no vista, and realized that prevailing in this case was not solely about the apartment. It was about demonstrating that I had not spent my life toiling relentlessly for naught. The legal conflict was commencing, and I understood I had no alternative but to pursue it to its conclusion. The attorney lodged the urgent request with the court, seeking to freeze the apartment sale until the judge could review all pertinent information. Within days, a provisional order was issued, preventing Aisha from finalizing the sale. News of the injunction swiftly reached Aisha, and she retained her own legal counsel, who commenced dispatching correspondence to the court asserting I had voluntarily bestowed the apartment upon her as a future gift. Her lawyer included declarations purporting my pride in assisting her to establish a prosperous life, portraying me as a father who made a grand gesture of affection. The exchange of legal documents between the attorneys persisted for days. Each submission felt like a renewed contention, with Aisha's attorney striving to lift the freeze and mine contending I had been pressured while ailing and exhausted. The strain significantly impacted my health. One night, chest pains awoke me, gasping for breath. I pressed the call button, and nurses hastened in to find me struggling to respire. They transferred me from my small room to the elder residence's medical ward, connecting me to monitors that beeped throughout the night. As word of the situation spread, former neighbors and colleagues began appearing at the elder residence. Some brought comforting meals or modest cash envelopes. They recounted to the staff stories of the years I spent working double shifts to care for Aisha, ensuring everyone heard of my extensive sacrifices. A few of my former coworkers pooled their resources to begin covering my overdue medical expenses, assuring me they had witnessed my dedication and would not let me contend alone. The elder residence's administration grew impatient with the unpaid bills. The director informed me they would have to discharge me if payments were not rendered. My elder brother intervened once more, pledging to temporarily cover the outstanding balance so I would not lose my accommodation. He signed a personal guarantee with the residents, granting me time to continue pursuing the case. A visiting neighbor contacted a local journalist regarding the predicament. Within days, an article appeared in an online news publication detailing how a father who had devoted his life to his daughter had been abandoned and divested of everything. The narrative was widely disseminated, and reporters began contacting the elder residents seeking further details. Photographs of me in my hospital bed circulated on social media with captions condemning elder mistreatment. Aisha's name rapidly became public, and individuals began criticizing her in comment sections and online community forums. Aisha's classmates started distancing themselves after learning of the events. Some who had previously accompanied her on trips and posted shared photos deleted those images from their accounts. People began sending messages of encouragement, expressing their shock at what they had read. Local media outlets picked up the story from the original online article, broadcasting segments about the case during evening news. Each time a new broadcast aired, more individuals contacted the elder residents offering assistance or inquiring how they could contribute. My lawyer visited me daily, accumulating every document he could locate that illustrated my health condition during the weeks preceding the apartment transfer. He gathered hospital records, prescription receipts, and statements from my factory supervisor confirming I was working dangerously long hours before collapsing. The lawyer asserted these would demonstrate I was in no condition to make significant decisions when Aisha pressured me. The university where Aisha studied initiated a disciplinary hearing process after receiving complaints from other students who overheard her boasting about abandoning me. Professors who had seen her online posts and heard her comments in class filed reports. Administrators scheduled meetings with students to gather information on whether Aisha's actions violated university policies. Concurrently, my elder brother began organizing peaceful demonstrations outside the gates of Aisha's university. Small groups of individuals carried placards advocating for justice, chanting about the importance of caring for elderly parents and urging the university to hold her accountable. Photographs of the protests circulated online, contributing to the escalating attention on the case. Community elders from our neighborhood formed a collective to visit local mosques, churches, and community centers, sharing my narrative and cautioning others about the perils of abandoning elderly parents. They collected signatures for a petition demanding more stringent laws to safeguard elders from exploitation, delivering copies to the offices of local politicians. Volunteers from organizations dedicated to elder care began visiting the residents. They assisted me with minor tasks such as bathing, changing garments, and tidying my room. They also provided fresh provisions, ensuring I consumed meals superior to the diluted soup typically served by the residents. Their benevolence offered me brief moments of solace, knowing I was not entirely alone. As days passed, media coverage expanded. National newspapers featured the story, running articles with headlines about betrayal and the pursuit of fairness. News programs broadcast live updates from outside the courthouse. Whenever a new legal filing occurred, reporters interviewed neighbors, coworkers, and former teachers who all corroborated my nearly 2 decades of sacrificing everything to raise Aisha. Each time I learned of another news report or observed more people congregating outside the courthouse, I understood the tide was shifting. My lawyer informed me the subsequent steps would be pivotal. With a hearing scheduled soon to determine whether the apartment freeze would persist or be lifted, I lay in the medical ward bed each night, listening to the monitor's beep, aware that the struggle was far from over, but finally feeling as though the world was acknowledging what had transpired. On the morning of the hearing, the courthouse was filled with journalists, neighbors, and strangers who had followed the narrative through news and social media. Volunteers distributed brochures on elder abuse while cameras flashed as my elder brother assisted me from the ambulance and into the courtroom. The judge called the session to order, and both attorneys stepped forward to commence their arguments regarding the apartment transfer that had left me destitute. My lawyer presented photographs of me from the hospital, depicting my frail physique and medical apparatus attached to my body. He laid out records from the weeks prior to my signing the documents, including a chronology of late-night shifts and missed meals. He contended I had been physically and mentally incapable of comprehending the ramifications of transferring the apartment, let alone doing so voluntarily. Medical reports from physicians confirmed I had been on the verge of collapse. Aisha's attorney countered by asserting to the court that I was manipulative, portraying me as a father who imposed unreasonable expectations on his daughter. He described me as someone unwilling to relinquish control, attempting to dictate Aisha's life by retaining everything in my name. The lawyer insisted Aisha had committed no wrongdoing and had merely accepted what was rightfully bestowed upon her. Witness after witness was summoned. A former colleague testified that I routinely skipped meals and worked double shifts to meet Aisha's needs. A neighbor informed the court of observing me carrying heavy bags late at night despite appearing unwell. A nurse from the elder residence described how Aisha's sole visit had been to ridicule me, bringing friends who took photographs and laughed. Each statement added weight to the case, illustrating the pattern of exploitation and abandonment. Forensic accountants presented bank statements highlighting the substantial transfers from my account to Aisha's shortly before she placed me in the elder residence. They pointed out payments made to luxury establishments and hotels in the weeks following those transfers, demonstrating the funds were expended on personal indulgences rather than anything related to my care or welfare. The judge listened attentively and reviewed the accumulating stack of documents and testimonies. By midday, he announced the freeze on the apartment sale would remain until a comprehensive financial investigation was completed. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as Aisha rose and walked briskly out, disregarding reporters calling her name. Cameras captured her storming down the courthouse steps, her face taut with frustration at the setback. During a recess in the hearing, chest pains returned with greater intensity. Nurses in the courthouse rushed over as I slumped in the wheelchair, unable to breathe properly. An ambulance transported me back to the elder residence's infirmary. Doctors stabilized my condition, but I was too weak to return for the concluding hours of the day's proceedings. My elder brother and lawyer continued representing me, transmitting updates as soon as new developments occurred. The news media covered every moment. Stories aired on television and online, recounting how a father had sacrificed everything for his daughter only to be forsaken. Public sentiment shifted further in my favor, with comment sections and phone lines inundated with messages of solidarity. Hashtags concerning my struggle gained traction across social media platforms, and interviews with former teachers and neighbors were broadcast during primetime news slots. Former coworkers organized an online fundraising campaign to assist in covering my medical and legal expenses. The initiative went viral overnight, with thousands contributing modest sums that quickly exceeded the target. Volunteers visited the elder residence to deliver donations and offer aid. Some even remained to assist with chores in my room or provide meals superior to the bland fare typically served. Aisha's acquaintances began severing ties, apprehensive of being associated with the escalating scandal. They deleted photographs with her from social media accounts and issued statements condemning her actions. Some who had supported her during parties or vacations came forward with accounts of witnessing her boasting about abandoning me and seizing my funds. The university responded to the public outcry by announcing Aisha's suspension pending a thorough disciplinary inquiry. They cited ethical breaches and conduct unbecoming of a student representing the institution. The news spread rapidly, inflicting another blow to Aisha's deteriorating social and academic standing. Forensic accountants continued scrutinizing records, unearthing even more funds Aisha had withdrawn or spent in concealed ways. Transfers to accounts in other cities and payments for lavish vacations were traced, bolstering the case and revealing a clear pattern of financial exploitation. Community members who had never encountered me before organized charitable events, including food drives and neighborhood fairs, to raise awareness about elder abuse. Local leaders spoke about evolving attitudes towards caring for aging parents and safeguarding them from exploitation. Funds collected from these events were delivered to my elder brother to support my ongoing care. As night descended, the lawyer contacted the elder residents with the day's final news. The judge announced a conclusive decision would be rendered soon. Once the financial investigation concluded, reporters stationed outside the courthouse promised live updates the moment the ruling was delivered. Lying in bed surrounded by monitors and wires, I listened to the faint sounds of volunteers chatting outside my door, knowing the struggle was far from over, but finally believing the truth was on my side. The court mandated a comprehensive independent medical assessment to review my condition during the period I transferred the apartment. A specialist visited the elder residence with assistance, examining my health records, hospital reports, and interviewing the nurses who attended to me during those critical weeks. They noted the extreme fatigue, documented rapid weight loss, and included statements regarding my fainting episodes and chest pains leading up to my collapse. After days of evaluation, the medical team submitted a report confirming I was physically and mentally compromised from overwork and stress at the time I signed the documents, rendering me incapable of making informed decisions. My lawyer presented the new medical report in the courtroom, submitting it as central evidence. He provided copies to the judge, explaining how it directly supported claims of coercion. The judge accepted the documents into the case file. Aisha's attorney attempted to argue the report was biased, asserting my elder brother had influenced the evaluation. He insisted my brother was manipulating the situation to reclaim the apartment. The judge reviewed their objections, but dismissed them, stating the court-appointed medical team was impartial and beyond influence. News of the medical report rapidly disseminated through national media channels. Evening broadcasts led with headlines about the father whose sacrifices had left him hospitalized while his daughter attempted to sell all his possessions. Newspapers ran full-page stories describing how I toiled day and night to provide for Aisha, only to be abandoned when I became too frail to continue. Influential commentators and community leaders appeared on talk shows discussing the urgent need for stronger safeguards against elder exploitation. A peaceful demonstration outside the courthouse followed soon after. Former colleagues and volunteers marched with signs advocating for justice. Neighbors, community elders, and individuals who had never met me gathered in support, holding candles and sharing narratives about the importance of respecting parents and elders. Organizers distributed flyers with information on elder abuse prevention, and local news stations broadcast live interviews from the demonstration. The university completed its investigation into Aisha's conduct. Administrators announced her expulsion for egregious ethical violations, citing documented financial exploitation and abandonment of a dependent parent. They issued a statement explaining they would not tolerate such behavior from students, especially when it jeopardized the university's reputation. News of the expulsion spread across social media platforms, eliciting thousands of comments condemning Aisha and commending the university's decision. Social media feeds were inundated with posts about my story. Influencers with millions of followers shared videos discussing my case, emphasizing how many elders are susceptible when they rely entirely on their offspring. Videos showcasing moments from the rallies and interviews with my elder brother circulated widely, attracting contributions and support from individuals nationwide. Hashtags demanding justice trended for days, with people tagging public officials and calling for legislative amendments to protect elders. At the subsequent court session, the judge appointed a forensic accountant to audit Aisha's finances. Over several days, the accountant reviewed transactions from the weeks preceding and following the apartment signing. They uncovered payments for luxury hotels, designer boutiques, and international flights undertaken with friends. Substantial sums were traced to credit cards linked to shopping sprees and upscale restaurants, far exceeding what Aisha had ever earned independently. The findings revealed a clear pattern of expenditure funded by money transferred from my accounts. After reviewing the forensic report, the judge issued an order freezing all of Aisha's bank accounts to prevent her from accessing any funds until the case concluded. Aisha's lawyers attempted to argue the freeze was excessively severe, but the judge dismissed their objections, explaining it was essential to secure evidence and prevent further misuse of the funds in a final attempt to salvage the situation. Aisha tried to contact my elder brother privately. She reached out through calls and text messages, proposing an out-of-court settlement if he withdrew the case. But since she had previously blocked me and he had now blocked her in turn, these attempts failed immediately. There was no longer a means for her to negotiate directly, precluding any chance for a clandestine resolution outside the court. Meanwhile, letters arrived at the elder residence daily. People sent cards with messages of encouragement, small donations to help cover my care, and personal stories about their own struggles in caring for elderly family members. Volunteers continued to visit with hot meals, blankets, and toiletries. Nurses from nearby clinics offered complimentary checkups, assisting in stabilizing my health and alleviating the burden of unpaid medical bills. With momentum building, the judge scheduled a final hearing to definitively resolve the apartment dispute. Notices were dispatched to all parties, listing witnesses expected to testify and documents to be reviewed. News outlets reported the date on television and online, announcing the impending climax of a case that had captivated the nation's attention. In my room at the elder residence, I listened to the radio each evening as updates were broadcast, aware that the culmination of this battle was near and everything I had striven for would soon be decided. In the days leading up to the conclusive hearing, my attorney amassed dozens of declarations to present to the court. Neighbors recounted observing me depart home before dawn and return long after dusk, consistently carrying bags of groceries or provisions for Aisha. Former teachers submitted letters explaining my unwavering attendance at parent-teacher meetings, even when I appeared exhausted from overnight shifts. Coworkers detailed instances when I skipped meals or borrowed modest sums to cover school expenses. Each testimony depicted years spent dedicating everything to ensure Aisha possessed what she desired. The administrator of the elder residence appeared in court, taking the stand to confirm that Aisha had informed staff I was unable to walk or speak clearly when she arranged my placement. She clarified that upon my arrival, I was alert and capable of communication, contradicting Aisha's false assertions used to justify placing me in the residence against my will. The judge listened attentively, posing questions about the paperwork Aisha signed to commit me there. As the evidence accumulated, Aisha attempted to mitigate the damage by employing a public relations firm. They released a statement across news channels and social media claiming misunderstandings had led to the situation, insisting I had agreed to everything, but that details were distorted by outsiders. The statement was met with immediate condemnation. Comment sections filled with indignant messages, and opinion writers highlighted contradictions between her words and witness accounts. Former friends of Aisha came forward with screenshots of messages she had sent them. In these texts, she boasted about how she had rid herself of me to finally live her true life. The screenshots revealed her joking about the ease with which she convinced doctors and staff I could not care for myself. These messages rapidly circulated online and were admitted as evidence, providing irrefutable proof of her intentions. The forensic accountant took the stand to confirm patterns of substantial transfers from my accounts to Aisha's, demonstrating the timing corresponded precisely with my hospitalization. Charts and documents displayed every withdrawal, including transactions used to pay for international travel and high-end shopping. The accountant detailed purchases that clearly bore no relation to my care, strengthening the case that the money was acquired under false pretenses. As the proceedings continued, the judge directly addressed the courtroom, characterizing Aisha's actions as a grave betrayal of the fundamental duty children owe to parents. He called the situation a reminder of why laws protecting elders must be fortified. Individuals in the courtroom sat in silence as his words reverberated off the tall wooden walls, the gravity of the moment settling in. Volunteers and medical personnel continued visiting me at the elder residence, providing consistent care that aided my recovery. Small advancements, such as sitting upright for longer periods each day and consuming solid meals, indicated improvement. Each visit from those who believed in me brought renewed energy, allowing me to closely monitor the case updates. Community leaders initiated discussions about introducing new legislation to criminalize the deliberate abandonment of elderly parents. Proposals circulated to include financial penalties and potential incarceration for anyone proven to have exploited vulnerable elders. Petitions for these amendments garnered thousands of signatures in just a few days, with community centers, religious organizations, and neighborhood groups promoting awareness. Television stations broadcast updates every evening, keeping the public informed of every development. Talk shows invited experts to discuss elder rights and underscore how frequently silent struggles like mine go unnoticed until it is too late. Online articles included interviews with my elder brother and former colleagues, who described how I had worked ceaselessly for years to provide for Aisha. My lawyer formally requested restitution for the funds Aisha had taken, including money transferred without permission and amounts spent on luxuries. He also petitioned the court to award compensation for the medical costs I incurred due to the stress and health decline caused by the exploitation. Receipts from hospitals, pharmacies, and the elder residents were added to the case file, illustrating how swiftly expenses accumulated. Aisha's lawyer argued that she had acted immaturely but did not intend lasting harm. He suggested leniency, stating Aisha was young and unaware of the severity of her actions. The judge listened but gave no indication of agreement, flipping through documents and nodding only at specific details of the case. When the day's proceedings were nearing their end, the judge permitted me to address Aisha directly. A nurse wheeled me into the courtroom, where I beheld her for the first time in months. I spoke of the nights spent laboring until dawn, the missed meals, and the aspirations I harbored of providing her with a life superior to my own. I described the solitude of awakening in the elder residence, and how every sacrifice was made out of affection. The courtroom was silent as I concluded, my voice wavering but clear, vowing to see the struggle through to its end. The judge announced a final verdict would be delivered soon, setting the date and reminding all parties to prepare. Reporters awaiting outside shared the news within minutes, and updates spread across social media. National anticipation intensified as people pondered the case's outcome, with many calling for a ruling that would deliver justice not only for me, but for countless others who suffered in silence. On the morning of the verdict, the courthouse steps were lined with individuals holding placards bearing messages such as "Justice for Fathers" and "Protect Our Elders." Reporters stood in clusters, broadcasting live as more supporters arrived. Security personnel directed the crowd to maintain a clear entrance, but chants of support resonated across the square. A few volunteers distributed pamphlets on elder abuse awareness, while a small banner with my name inscribed upon it was displayed near the courthouse entrance. Inside the courtroom, the judge entered with the conclusive ruling in hand. Silence descended as everyone awaited. He commenced by declaring the apartment transfer null and void, stating that the evidence proved I had been coerced while physically and mentally incapacitated. Ownership of the apartment was immediately reinstated to me, and paperwork was ordered to finalize the transfer without delay. The courtroom erupted in subdued applause from my supporters seated in the gallery. The judge continued, mandating Aisha to repay every cent she had withdrawn from my bank accounts. He included an amount for damages covering emotional distress, physical suffering, and the costs of my medical care since being abandoned. Aisha stood motionless as the total was read aloud, the sum exceeding what she could ever repay independently. To further address the gravity of what had transpired, the judge imposed a suspended jail sentence on Aisha. She would not immediately serve time in prison, but was obligated to complete thousands of hours of community service working in elder care facilities. The judge made it unequivocal that failure to fulfill these hours would activate her prison sentence. The courtroom observed as Aisha's face paled. Her legs trembled, and she collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed by the reality of her actions. My lawyer stepped forward, collecting the signed documents, returning the apartment to my name. He thanked the judge and the courtroom staff before shaking hands with my elder brother. Outside, news cameras filmed as he announced the victory to the waiting crowd, cheers rising as the words left his mouth. My elder brother arranged for a vehicle to transport me home. Volunteers from the elder residence assisted in packing my few possessions into boxes, carefully folding garments, and placing them into suitcases. Nurses offered heartfelt farewells, some embracing me before my departure. The staff formed a line at the entrance, applauding as I was wheeled through. Reporters captured every moment, broadcasting live as I exited the building with my head held high. When we arrived at my elder brother's residence, neighbors and friends stood awaiting. Balloons and banners adorned the gate, and platters of food were arranged for visitors. As I was carried inside, people lined the driveway, cheering and patting my shoulders. Television crews filmed my arrival, airing stories that evening, describing my return home after months of hardship, stronger than before. That night, legislators announced they were drafting what they termed Umar's Law, a set of proposed regulations to enhance protections for elders and establish clear penalties for exploitation or abandonment. Lawmakers interviewed on news channels described how my case had revealed deficiencies in existing laws and vowed to swiftly enact reforms. Letters and packages arrived at my elder brother's house daily. Some contained handmade gifts from children. Others included lengthy letters from elders facing similar mistreatment. Messages streamed in from individuals sharing stories about struggles with ungrateful children or financial abuse, thanking me for bringing national attention to an issue they felt powerless to address. A prominent elder advocacy group reached out, offering me an honorary ambassadorial position to help raise awareness about elder rights. They proposed incorporating my story into national campaigns and invited me to speak at conferences. My elder brother read the offer aloud in the living room, and family members applauded as they heard the words. In the days following the verdict, my elder brother escorted me to the cemetery where my parents rested. He pushed my wheelchair to their headstones where I placed flowers and sat quietly, expressing gratitude in my heart for the lessons they imparted and the fortitude they granted me to endure. Family members stood behind me, hands on my shoulders as I bowed my head in appreciation. Not long after, community members organized a modest ceremony in a local park. A stage was erected, and people gathered to hear updates on Umar's Law and learn how they could assist elders in their neighborhoods. When I was brought to the stage, I requested to speak. I took the microphone and publicly forgave Aisha, stating, "I hope she will cultivate compassion and evolve into someone who will care for others in the future." The crowd applauded, and reporters captured the moment, describing it as a potent example of resilience and grace. By evening, I settled into my elder brother's home. Volunteers visited frequently, offering support, and community members came by with meals and provisions. Family photographs were hung on the walls of my new room, and a comfortable bed was prepared. I sat at the window observing children playing in the yard, knowing that I was finally home, surrounded by those who genuinely cared, prepared to spend my remaining years with tranquility, respect, and dignity.